All right, so what we've done so far, we've made some primitive buildings. We've learned the tools necessary. We've also learned the extrude tool, the edge loop tool. We've learned the slide edge loop tool, and we've learned move, rotate, scale, all those things. We've learned join, merge verts, all that. And this really, as far as like base level modeling, certainly novice entry level modeling, these are pretty much all the tools you're going to need. There's a couple of more that we're going to learn today, just going over. But for the most part, we've learned all the tools that we want, and now it's just about really learning some more features in Blender, make things a little bit smoother, and then getting practice making a lot of different tools or a lot of different objects, and then kind of how to go about doing that. So I'm going to add in mesh, a cube, and I always like to start with a cube. Sometimes you could start with a cylinder for different things, and sometimes that's okay, but I always like to start with a cube. It's just easier for me. I really like the fact that we have the four faces, the faces with just four edges. Sometimes when you make a cylinder, you're going to get that weird face on the top that has a lot more than the four edges. It's just harder to work with. Certainly harder to keep the topology. When I say topology, I just mean the ability to insert more edge loops and get more detail. So you'll notice when I have this cube, if I go into edit mode and I insert an edge loop, then I can put it anywhere, and that edge loop is going to go all the way around my object, right? And I can get more faces, and I can make more detail with those faces, whatever. If I put in a cylinder, right, I can do the same thing, insert edge loops, but I can't insert them this way. I can't get more detail on that top face. For me, I just don't like the way that works, so I don't use a cylinder very often. Sometimes when I get into more detail, we'll look later in the semester, I sometimes just use a plane, and then I model off of that, just one plane, using extrusions and different elements. So, first thing I want to talk about, this week is kind of about tips and tricks, learning a few extra steps, a few extra simple tools in Blender that just make your life easier. So, I think you've probably noticed that we've come up to object mode to go to edit, and we've come back to edit to go to object mode when we needed to, and it's fine, right? Everything is right here. We know where it is, but it's just really easy. You'll see when you drop it down, there's a 4 right here in object mode, and then you have face, edge, and vertex mode as well. 4 automatically selects the entire object. This is object mode. If you press 3 on your keyboard, then that allows you to go into face selection mode. And we've struggled with this coming up and finding the mode that we want. Right? So 4 is object mode, 3 is face selection, 2 is going to be edge selection, so now you're just working with the edges, and 1 is vertex selection, so now you're just working with the vertexes. And we already talked about W is move, E is rotate, and R is scale. So now, knowing just the 4, 3, 2, 1, that's really going to speed up your ability to create objects, to modify objects, to work with things. Now, we also learned the extrude tool, right? There's a shortcut. If you hover over a lot of these tools, they're going to tell you what their shortcut is. The extrude tool is a shortcut, Control E. So you can select a face on an object, then Control E, and that gives you an option to extrude the object. And it's always going to extrude off perpendicular to the face. And this is a really cool feature, right? Because now you can just much more quickly use the extrude tool. And when you're done, you just hit move, rotate, or scale, or Q for quit, or Q is just a selection tool. I like to use Q and call it the quit tool, because whatever tool I'm in, whether it's the extrude tool or the move tool or the rotate or the scale, when I hit Q, I'm no longer in a tool. And sometimes that just makes it easier because sometimes the tool widget like really gets in the way of what you're trying to look at, right? And you just want to click something different or you want to navigate around. Hitting Q gets out of the tool. So again, pretty quick. W is move, E is rotate, R is scale. 4 is object mode, 3 is face mode, 2 is edge mode, 1 is vertex mode. Control E is extrude. Some of them don't have hotkeys. And really the reason they don't is just because they don't get used as often. But I want to show you one that should probably get used more often than it does. Earlier we used the extrude tool on the treasure chest. We extruded it and then we moved a shape down to get something that looks like this on the treasure chest, right? So we used the extrude tool and we got that shape. There's an inset faces tool, and this one has a shortcut of, I think it's I. Yeah, shortcut of I. And that does the exact same thing, except it's a little bit smoother to do. So you'll click it, you'll press I on your keyboard, and then you get that extra face. Now, this is important. The reason that this has its own hotkey is because a lot of the times you need more detail, but you don't want to go through the process of, adding in all of these edge loops just to get the detail of maybe these faces right here, right? So you can get that same detail instead, by using the inset faces. Now we also want to use the bevel. The bevel is it's kind of like inset faces, but instead of working with the face and bringing it down, it works with kind of the edges around. So I'm going to select a face, and then I'm going to use the bevel tool, and it's a shortcut Control B. And you'll see as you do it, it creates that same kind of geometry, right, where you have 4 faces around an interior face. But the difference is it's giving you depth to those faces. And I've done it twice, which was not ideal, so we're going to go back. We'll pull it out, and you see that it creates those extra faces. And I can select the face and do it again, right? And if I'm doing that, then that can help me get kind of a rounded effect on the edge if I do it well. But the general idea is it creates the same geometry as the inset face tool does, right? So but instead of keeping everything flat, it moves the outside edge around. And you can do the same thing with just edges. So let me go ahead. I'm going to use my extrude tool here. I'm going to pull this off. And then I'm going to go into my edge selection by pressing 2. I'm going to select these edges on my keyboard, on my object, and I'm going to hit the bevel tool, which again is Control B. And now I'm doing the same thing with the edges. But this is useful. Let's say I had these edges, and I wanted to make this more of a cylinder. So I talked earlier about the idea of sometimes you can make a cylinder, but sometimes you have the tool available, and in this case, the bevel tool, and that'll start to give me kind of a cylinder shape. So I'm going to start over here, go to object mode by pressing 4 on my keyboard. I'm going to delete whatever that was. I'm going to add a new cube. And now I want to make this cube a cylinder. So what I'm going to do is go into edit mode by pressing 3 on the keyboard for faces. I'm going to select all of the edges actually around. So just these 4 edges. I'm going to use my bevel tool. And I'm going to bevel them pretty much as far, almost, not all the way, but pretty close, right? And that kind of gives me the effect of a cylinder, right? I mean, I'd have to do it more than just that once, but there's kind of the idea. Another way to do it, and this way kind of keeps the contours that you want, is just to use the loop cut. And first go through and select just those first two. And remember when I was talking with the treasure chest, you want to merge the verts on an object as soon as possible. Another thing that you want to do is put the new edge loops that you've placed in position as soon as possible. You don't want to press, or you don't want to insert like 50 edge loops and then start trying to move them around. What you want to do is sometimes you'll just insert maybe 1 or 2 edge loops and then you'll move them, but however many you can, so that you get access, so you can actually select them and arrange them. So in this case, again, I've inserted some more and I'm going to extrude them. And then Q on the keyboard to quit, and there is my cylinder. Go back to object mode. I just want to make it a little bit taller. So this is a little bit different than the cylinder that we would have started with. So if I went to object mode and added a cylinder, right, I get pretty much the same shape. I think it has a few more divisions, but my cylinder allows me to come in and I could insert edge loops around and get more detail if I wanted to, whereas on this cylinder over here, I cannot do that across the top. So again, the hotkeys, and that's kind of the purpose of this video, is just learning some hotkeys, the ability to navigate around. When you're in object mode, you have an add cube button, so you notice I've been coming up to add mesh cube. The default, the cube is just the easiest shape to start with. So you can click add cube and then you kind of build it. And then you can add a cube wherever you want. It gives you a little bit more control. You know, the default cube is always going to be kind of 1 by 1 by 1. And you can work with that, and most of the time this is fine. But if you have a different shape that, or a different size that you're working with and you're assigning things together, then sometimes it's just easier to add the cube. But you can manage that however is easiest for you. So in the next video, we're going to go through just modeling a couple of things, looking at, again, a couple of other tools, and then we'll get into what the project is going to be for this week. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you in the next video.